What was Metroid like from Gorea's perspective? What did it know, when did it know it, and how did that affect what it did? Hello and welcome back to the Lore Raider, home of all things Metroid with a spattering of Tomb Raider and Bayonetta. Welcome. To understand the perspective of an entity like Gorea, it would help to know its origins. I've covered this topic on the channel before, but Gorea is a divine entity, called an Old One like being from Verodi himself, but specifically, Gorea is most likely a being called a Power. The other power we meet, the Animus, explains that the true gods of Metroid create beings like it to punish civilizations that go awry. The Animus, for its part, completely destroyed the Extreme Galaxy, with only space pirates, craftsmen, and humans calling the galaxy home, which obviously immigrated there from elsewhere. Couple this with the fact that in Metroid, civilizations that do not strike a balance between spirituality and technology always meet a sticky end. Take the Bion race, Bryonians, Talvanians, and others. It would seem that Gorea is herself a power meant to deal with the Alimbic race, who dwell in the Tetra Galaxy. We know that Gorea does in fact have a perspective, as according to the Alimbic records, when it first appeared, Gorea spoke its own name, hence how we have, well, Gorea. What is less clear is what Gorea thought about having to do its job. Certainly the Alimbics describe it as a horror beyond imagining, but they aren't exactly an unbiased source. We can assume, however, that Gorea is both crafty and cruel, as it takes the form of the Alimbics, absorbs whatever technology they throw at it, and uses it back against them. And when it's doing its exterminations, we see it's highly destructive. Take the planet Alinos, whose core was literally blown out, reducing the planet to a lava-ridden hellscape. The Alimbics tell us it took only 3 months for Gorea to eradicate their entire civilization, the horror having pushed them back to their last few worlds. For Gorea, everything must have seemed to be going to plan. It must have seemed to be just another day at the office, but we know what happens next. The Alimbics sacrifice themselves, trapping Gorea within the Seal Sphere, using its own power to fuel its prison. Then they chuck Gorea into a prison ship, and then chuck that into the Infinity Void, a parallel universe full of antimatter. It was a Pyrrhic victory for the Alimbics. After all, they all still died, and technically Gorea achieved its goals. And alas, Gorea wasn't truly defeated. As the powerful being it was still able to telepathically communicate with the main universe. The problem is this: Gorea doesn't do that right away. So the question is, why not? Well, the answer is the Chozo. By this point, the Chozo, along with probably the Luminoth and other races, would have seen the destruction of both the Tetra Galaxy and the Extreme Galaxy, and would know not to trust anything Gorea would send. It isn't a coincidence that by the time Gorea actually sent its message, its signal tens of thousands of years later, all the old races that would have remembered it are long gone, or at least greatly diminished. Interestingly, it would seem Gorea in its isolation kept up with current events. The intro to Prime Hunters tells us that Gorea sent its message of ultimate power to countless different species, all pre-translated in their own various languages, and a note about that promise. It is doubtful the wiser races of the past, Chozo, Luminoth, would have went in for this, but Gorea seems to know that the squabbling space pirates, humans, Kraken Empire, and so on would jump to the opportunity. Once again, everything goes to plan for Gorea. The best bounty hunters of the day arrive on the scene in the Alimbic cluster and begin piecing together the puzzle to Gorea's freedom, all culminating with all the hunters, save Samus, firing and greatly damaging the Seal Sphere, as well as giving Gorea its first meal in thousands of years. Never doubt that Gorea isn't intelligent. All that remained was to siphon its power back from the Seal Sphere and kill the sole remaining bounty hunter, in its way, Samus Aran. However, this is where things hit an interesting snag. For those unaware, Samus Aran is the Chosen One, reaffirmed numerous games, which I go into great depth in this video here. But among her powers is the ability to passively create new futures nothing, not even Mother Brain, can foresee. So it's fitting that in a battle between a weapon of the gods and the Chosen One, that the first and only example of a timeline split in this series occurs. There could be a video in of itself breaking down the possible reasons for this break. Were the gods torn on which tool to side with? Were Gorea and Samus just that evenly matched? Your guess is as good as mine on this. For the so-called bad timeline, Gorea wins the day, defeats Samus, and presumably goes on to destroy life unabated. If the Alimbics couldn't stop it, what hope did the Federation, the Phazon, or the Space Pirates really have? In the good timeline, Gorea doesn't speak, but no doubt it must feel cheated. Samus somehow knows about the secret Alimbic superweapon, the Omega Cannon, which is used to put an end to Gorea. The nightmarish horror, no doubt too weakened to use its adaptation powers to copy it, it explodes and is gone. At the end of the day, what can we say for Gorea? It was cruel, to be sure, but also highly observant, patient, and intelligent as well. It managed to topple likely the greatest civilization of all time in the Alimbics, and the moment the Elder Races were in a serious state of decline, Gorea seized the opportunity to lure in unsuspecting fools to free it from its prison, and to its credit, in 50% of the outcomes, comes out on top. The only Metroid villain to win, unless you count Greed, who died shortly after accomplishing his goals. Gorea reminds us that in Metroid, the gods are fickle and certainly not our friend, and at the end of the day, Gorea did its job well.